Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Minimalist podcast. I'm your host, Meg Carney, and I'm an outdoor and environmental writer and author of the book, Outdoor Minimalist, Waste Less Hiking, Camping, and Backpacking. The Outdoor Minimalist podcast has the goal to give listeners actionable ways to waste less hiking, camping, backpacking, and more during every step of their process. Your impact outdoors starts long before you hit the trail and goes beyond leave no trace ethics. You'll learn how to identify sustainable outdoor brands, how to ask hard questions regarding sustainability, and begin to shift and evolve your mindset to integrate minimalism into all of your outdoor pursuits. In episode 110 of the Outdoor Minimalist podcast, I'm excited to introduce Lukas Gräf, the U.S. head of growth and expansion for Trelino. Trelino produces composting toilets perfect for camping, van life, boating, tiny houses, and more. So if you're curious about how composting toilets work, if they're even worth investing in for things like travel and tiny living, then this is the perfect episode for you. At the end of 2018, Lukas moved to his hometown of Cologne, Germany, and joined the team at STARTPLATZ as the COO and later managing director to take the West German startup ecosystem to the next level. Then in 2022, he joined the Camper Active team. Camper Active is an outdoor and lifestyle company with products around the topic of nature and sustainability. Under the brand name Trelino, they have rapidly risen to become Europe's leading store for dry toilets in the past 2 years and recently expanded into the US market. Adventuring plans on your calendar? Remember to grab your Lava Linens travel towel on your way out the door. Founded by a mother-daughter team, Lava Linens crafts durable, luxurious travel towels as a more sustainable and better performing alternative to microfiber and cotton towels. Powered by flax, hemp, and tencel, they're designed to be by your side for years to come. Use the code Outdoor Minimalist for 15% off your next order. So thanks for joining me on the Outdoor Minimalist podcast today, Lukas. Before we get right into all of our toilet talk, I do want to know a little bit about you and the things that you enjoy to do in your free time. So how did you get into outdoor recreation and how does it fit into your life now?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on this pod. I was born and raised in Germany and basically spent a lot of time abroad. So I studied and worked in the Netherlands, a bit in the US, and then for most time in Sweden. And I've always been very outdoor enthusiastic, you can say. And I've done quite a few hiking trips mainly. So what I enjoy most in the summer is obviously hiking, but also doing stuff on the water. So did a lot of kayaking and sailing in Sweden, where there are loads of beautiful small islands. So you can do a lot of exploring. You can pitch your tent on a deserted island basically and stay overnight. And then the next day you take your kayak and go somewhere else. And I've done one big trek or hike in the Alps, basically 2 weeks, doing just carrying everything on my back with 2 friends and just getting out there and following, I think it was 12,000 vertical meters up and down the Alps, which was super exciting. So yeah, that's mainly what I love to do in the summer, and then in the winter mainly skiing. But yeah, other than that, not much to do really outside on that side here. And I've always worked with startups. I got into that right out of university when I was still in Sweden, and worked a lot with helping small startups grow and expand to new countries, internationalize, etc. And then when I was back in Germany, after working a few years with my dad in his company, I left to join a startup and was actually approached by the 2 founders, which I knew personally, which is the company where I work today, called Camper Active. And yeah, both of the founders have been camping since they were little, and that basically got me into this whole industry. While I haven't worked with the topic before, I have a lot of personal areas and personal touch points with it.
So it wasn't really your goal to be in the outdoor industry per se after university. It just kind of happened that way.
It happened that way, yeah, but since it is part of my passion, I think it was not a bad fit at all. So I really enjoy it. I really enjoy working with people, like working in a B2C business, and also helping people live a better life.
Absolutely. So before we talk about the Camper Active product that you work with, I mean, I'm sure you work with more products, but the one we're talking about today, I do want to talk a little bit about toilets in general, I guess, and how they fit within recreational vehicles. We actually did an episode, oh gosh, now the name is blanking me, on like living in a camper.
Mhm.
And they said that their worst experience is with their composting toilet. So I'm just kind of like excited to hear what you have to say about them. And so like in RVs and vans, I don't know, boats, tiny houses, all those like small spaces and portable spaces that people can live and recreate in. What are kind of like the standards for toilets, and like historically, I guess if you know the history of toilets in recreational vehicles, that would be interesting too.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I won't probably be able to give you the full history in detail, and this is a lot of knowledge that I have acquired from people in the industry. But the status quo for most RVs, I think similar in America and in Europe, has always been the cassette toilet, which is plug and play toilet that you can install in any vehicle. The larger vehicles typically have them fixed somewhere, either in a bathroom or in a dedicated area. And there are also smaller portable versions of that. And with the cassette toilet, basically everything goes into one bucket. A chemical is added, dissolves everything, and then you have to dump this liquid at the specific dumping stations. Most of them are situated at camping sites, camping grounds. And that has been more or less the standard in the industry for many decades. And then the other thing that is an industry for the largest RVs are the black tank, gray tank solutions, which is basically all of your waste. The toilet waste goes into the black tank, and smaller water waste from like the sink, etc., goes into the gray tank, and those tanks are then being used for a few days or a week at a time, and then also dumped at the campground. That's basically I think the two main categories that were there in terms of toilets. And I know that on sailboats, this trend towards composting toilet started even a bit earlier than in RVs or camper vans.
Yeah, when do you think that trend kind of started with composting toilets and
Mm.
kind of like people opting for those instead of the cassette toilets like you were talking about?
So the underlying principle is decades or maybe in a century old, comes from the Nordics, from Scandinavia actually. So people have been using them in cabins and outhouses for many, many decades because they have no access to sewage system. And then what I can tell that in Europe, this whole trend of having portable composting toilets in your van basically kicked off in the last 5 to 10 years only. So it's very new. And the I don't really know why it started that late, or maybe because nobody else thought of it, and maybe because of the established industry with the cassette toilets. It was they didn't have a reason to change anything, and new companies were just not existent. So at least in Europe, everything changed in the last 5, 6, 7 years. And in the boat industry, I think the first composting toilets were in the 2000s, 2005, 2010. A couple of big American brands that are coming from the boat side, actually.
Yeah, that's interesting that it changed on boats, like, before RVs and vans and stuff. But I guess it kinda makes sense, it's a little bit harder to deal with waste when you're on water
Mm.
versus, like, having a dump station. Do you think the US kind of had a similar trajectory timeline? I know you're talking a lot about Europe and you're based in Europe, so if you're not sure exactly about, like, the United States, that's okay too.
Yeah, I mean, in the United States, it's a bit behind, actually, behind Europe, since we launched beginning of this year, end of last year, in the US. We were the first European brand to come to the US, and we were kind of the first offering a small portable solution, because all of the existing solutions in the composting toilet market were very bulky, heavy, and not portable at all. And so I think that just the US is lagging behind a bit in that regard. So there will definitely be more variety coming up as well in the next years.
The US is traditionally behind in a lot of things, so
Not always.
not always, but lately it feels that way. Okay, so let's talk about the composting toilets in general then. If Okay, when we initially talked, I think that you said that your toilets are actually a separating toilet, which is different from a composting toilet. So I am interested in the differences between those and how they work.
Yeah, technically, in the US, the category name is composting toilet, because that's what people know it under. In Europe, you would basically have a separating toilet as the category name, but nobody knows that word in the US, so we don't use it. But the main principle of the category is to separate number 1 and number 2. Liquids to the front, collected in a canister, and solids in the back, they go into a bucket. So that's the main principle. You separate number 1 and number 2 to take away the biggest reason for the smell. And then there are basically 2 types. So they are the type that we have, where we have a bag. So you line a plastic bag onto the bucket, and after each use, you pour a handful or a scoop of litter material on top to dry out the solids and take away any smell residue that is left. And then after a few days, you just tie up the bag and dispose it in a regular trash, or if you have a compost and if you're using biodegradable bags, you can also place it there. So that's what we do. And because of that, you don't really compost anything in the toilet, because it's just too little time for compost to happen, right? Composting takes many weeks or months. So that's why technically it's not a composting toilet, but you can place the bag on a compost afterwards. So in that sense, you could still compost it. But separating toilet makes the whole thing much more understandable, I think. And then
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no worries. Yeah, and then the other part, which is basically what the established companies in the US are doing, they also separate. Number 1 goes to the front, number 2 to the back. But then in the back, they have a whole big box where they put some litter material in the beginning. And then after each use, they have an agitator. So they mix and swirl this whole mass. And then they stop. And after the next use, they swirl and mix it again. And they leave this whole mass in there for 4 weeks, let's say, and then empty it. And then, of course, the emptying takes more time, is a bit more tedious, and the cleaning as well. So that's basically the big difference between the two solutions.
So do you think it is like the liner that makes it a little bit easier and the fact that you don't leave it as long? Because like traditional composting toilets, like I said, the previous guests, they didn't have a very good experience with their composting toilet. So what do you think makes like that more traditional, like stirring setup more difficult to manage?
Yeah, I think in a basic sense, it's not nice to do, and many people don't want to deal with their poo for that long or in that detail. So they like the bag approach much more. It's simpler and it's much quicker. Um, and yeah, maybe they also didn't have the right litter material to use, and there still was too much smell, and the mixing didn't work that well. Could be. And then, of course, many people also don't like the emptying and cleaning process, because yeah, the dirt can hide in many little corners because you don't have a bag in there, right? So with the bag, everything gets much easier.
Yeah, the only thing that I can think that maybe some people wouldn't gravitate towards like your separating toilet or like your version of a composting toilet is because of the bag. I guess like they wouldn't want to be using plastic or whatever. But um in the grand scheme of things, the waste is kind of all going to the same place. So what do you guys like, how do you guys get around that approach, I guess, or like that
Sure.
mindset where people are like, well, it's not as eco-friendly as these other composting toilets?
Of course, have been we have been knowing that from the beginning, and we want to be a environmentally friendly business. So we have two types of bags. So the first one is a biodegradable bag. I think it's made out of corn starch material. So if you leave that for 3 weeks, 4 weeks out in nature, it decomposes by itself. And the second option, if you want to throw it away, it's recycled plastic. So for that version, we provide bags that are in another life cycle already. And we definitely try to minimize any kind of new plastic being added to the environment.
Yeah, that seems kind of like the standard approach that would be the best. Um, when it comes to waste management after you remove the bag and waste from the toilet, you mentioned some of the options. So, like just putting it in the rubbish for like a landfill, and then also composting it yourself. And then if people do have access to industrial composting facilities, do they accept human waste or do you know how that process works at all?
I can't speak for it generally because it might or it differs maybe based on some states or counties. But we definitely heard people doing it. So we know it's possible in several places. And if people are also maybe sometimes skeptical of throwing it in the trash bin somewhere, it's just, comparable to a dog poo bag or a diaper bag, which is also human waste.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be I feel like most people are probably throwing it in the trash in the United States anyway, because there's not a ton of like municipalities that have good composting systems in place yet, some bigger cities. But if you're like traveling in an RV, I don't think there would be a lot of access to that, at least here, maybe in Europe.
Nah,
But
not that much in Europe either.
oh, but since we were kind of talking about, I don't know, maybe some of the differences between the United States and Europe, as a European company, why did you decide to branch into the United States?
Yeah, great question. So we've started in Germany 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and saw a tremendous growth very quickly. Also, I think because of the pandemic, and we launched right before, so it was a good timing in that sense. And many people started with camping, and many people wanted to switch from their cassette toilet to something more environmentally friendly and easier to use. And then we decided to go into new markets last year. So that was like France and Spain and Italy and a lot of the European neighboring countries. And then the US has always been a kind of a dream for the founders to expand to. And everybody knew it was a big market. Nobody knew how big. And that's basically why I came into the company last year, to take on the responsibility of internationalization. And we just tried it out, how it worked in the US. We went to a couple of trade shows to get some feedback from the customers, and we realized very early on that people are excited about such an option here because there wasn't anything similar. And then we said, okay, let's do it. We got everything up and running, and we've been now seeing very high interest from customers, and are very glad that we did.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, until I connected with you, I don't think I had heard of a toilet similar. So, yeah, that's awesome that you're in the US market now. And I'm realizing that I need to backtrack like just a little bit when we were talking about like the environmental like impact of is it the Trelino toilet? Is that what it's called?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Um, of the Trelino toilets, we didn't really touch on the impact of the cassette toilets at all,
Sure.
and, like, kinda, like, the difference in impact and cleaning, that would have. I guess we could talk about composting toilets in that same vein. So if you wouldn't mind touching on that, that would be great.
But yeah, I mean, cassette toilets, as I said in the introduction, they use chemicals that are added to the whole mix of liquids and solids. And then, since these are chemicals, you have to empty them at specific dumping stations, mostly at campgrounds. And I don't actually know what happens with that afterwards. So, but as these are highly toxic chemicals, I don't think they are generally beneficial for the environment. So I think every cassette toilet that is being replaced is good for the environment. And I'm sure the cassette toilet manufacturers are trying also to find better, less harmful chemicals. But yeah, at the end of the day, I guess they're still somewhat harmful still. And
When
then
Oh, go ahead.
the composting toilets with an agitator, with a mixer. I think they're normal. Mostly people also just fill it into a bag and then, dispose of the bag in a similar sense.
Yeah. One issue that I have heard of, because in the United States, when people are traveling in RVs or even vans, they do a lot of boondocking or like dry camping, and so there's not a facility to dump like stuff from a cassette toilet, the waste, and so they end up just dumping it on the ground. And that obviously poses a lot of hazards, even if it was just the straight waste, but then you talking about the chemicals as well, that could, like, run into waterways and things. So I think with the Trelino toilets, it's nice with the easier disposal. I think people are more likely to dispose of it properly, versus, like, having to go and find a dump station. They can put it in the standard trash. So that's another benefit that I have heard of that, and it is very gross, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's also a difference actually between the US and Europe, that there is much more nature in the US. more remoteness, and the distances are just much longer from A to B. So there are just way fewer campgrounds or dumping stations available, which makes our solution even more appealing to the US market, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that again, what differences do you see, I guess, other than the land, like the distances between the travel destinations? What differences do you see in like travel and waste management and recreation between the two continents?
Yeah, I think pretty interestingly, or maybe not surprisingly, Americans love to drive. There are no trains in the US. In Germany or in Europe, people would take a train maybe. And if people have to drive more than 3 hours, they're already annoyed. And in the US, driving 3 hours is like nothing. So I think that the appetite to drive is very high in the US. So everybody owns a car or two. Many more people have a recreational vehicle. I think the total number of RVs produced in the US is almost 50% higher than in all of Europe. And that means that a lot more people have a camper van or like an RV, or maybe even a trailer. And so a difference there is, of course, that the vehicles in the US are much bigger. The roads are wider, and you can really drive with a big vehicle no problem to any place. And in Europe, you will get a big problem when you enter like a small city with such a vehicle. So we have less maybe space constraints in the US in the vehicles. And we can maybe, in the future, for example, we can build bigger toilet versions for the US market, whereas in Europe, they wouldn't fit into the vehicles.
I kinda like that the toilet is small, though. I think that, like, adds to the, convenience of it, I guess. Um, and I guess when I have traveled, I do have a camper van, but it's also the only car I have, and it's very small. So, like, a smaller toilet would be the only option, like, viable option, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and that's also a big trend now towards the camper vans and I would say smaller vehicle. I mean, they're still bigger than a regular car, but I guess more and more people are getting into this camper van business now or lifestyle.
Yeah, I feel like it is more desirable to have a camper van or, like, do the van life, than it used to be. And then, like you said, I think COVID really, like, leaned onto that trend, and so a lot of people just have them as their recreational vehicle. Are there any other specifics about the toilet that we didn't really cover that you think listeners would be interested in learning about?
Yeah, I mean, what you touched on, so that they are very lightweight and portable. So I think 80% of our customers, they keep it portable. So they just store it maybe um, in a cupboard or under a bench or something, so that when they stop somewhere nice, they can take it out. And then we always say you can do your bathroom break with a view. Poo with a view is our slogan. And yeah, we've seen some amazing pictures of people stopping in amazing places and taking pictures of their Trelino. And I think that's like a big advantage of the compact size and the lightweight.
And if listeners are interested in learning more about the Trulino, how can they learn about your toilet options?
I think two things probably best. Number one, our website at mytrelino.com. We have a lot of blog posts describing how they work, what the difference are also to a cassette toilet, for example. And then we have a number of different options that people can compare to see what size they like or what model. And then on YouTube or Instagram, there are a lot of videos about Trelino. You can watch people that have it, talk about it, show how it works. get a feeling for it. And yeah, we also normally attend a couple of trade shows every year. So if people are around in California, Arizona, Colorado, they should swing by.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be sure to link all of that in the show notes so people can find it easily. And yeah, I'll be on the lookout for you guys at upcoming trade shows next year. I don't think I'm going to any more in 2023. But with that, thank you so much, Lukas, for taking the time to chat on the show today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. And if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book, on YouTube, or subscribe to our weekly newsletter at theoutdoorminimalist.com. For even more updates, other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with the shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.